It was supposed to be quick, in and out. I had my hoodie on, headphones in one hand, keys in the other. Rain tapped against the porch light, steady and rhythmic, like a warning I didn't understand at the time. I knocked once, maybe twice, just enough to be polite. I figured she wouldn't even be the one to answer. Maybe the housekeeper, maybe no one. I was about to leave the headphones in a plastic bag on the porch when I heard the lock click. Asterisk, and then she opened the door. Asterisk, she was standing there in nothing but a towel, clutching it with one hand near her chest, her other hand resting loosely on the doorknob. Her hair was pulled up, still damp, strands clinging to her neck. Steam from the bathroom behind her spilled faintly into the hallway, and I swear the scent of her shampoo, something soft and lavender, hung between us. Asterisk, we both froze. For a breath, maybe two. Asterisk, oh, she said, blinking, her face shifting from confusion to recognition. You single quotes, Adam, right? Asterisk, I nodded too quickly. Yeah, I just came to drop these off. I held up the headphones like proof I wasn't trespassing. Asterisk, she smiled, slow and apologetic. You caught me at a terrible moment. She adjusted the towel higher on her chest. Come in, just give me 1 minute to throw something on. Asterisk, I stepped inside before I could question whether I should. The door closed behind me with a soft click. The house felt warm, too warm, like the air had been recently filled with steam and silence. She disappeared upstairs, and I was left standing in the entryway like I had all those years ago, awkward and out of place. Asterisk, it wasn't the first time I'd been in this house. Back in high school, I was here almost every weekend. Her son, Jason, was my closest friend until he moved to Denver last fall for work. But I hadn't seen her since graduation, not really, and never like this. Asterisk, I wandered slowly into the living room, the headphones still in my hand, and took it all in. The furniture hadn't changed. The big armchair Jason always claimed. The side table with the chipped corner, the scent of fresh laundry lingered in the air, and something else, cinnamon, maybe. A mug sat half full on the coffee table, the kind of mug people forget when they're lost in thought, or when they're suddenly interrupted by someone at the door. Asterisk, a photo frame caught my eye, the two of them, mother and son, at his college graduation. Her hand on his shoulder. That same smile, but fuller somehow, brighter. I didn't hear her come back downstairs until she cleared her throat behind me. Asterisk, sorry about that, she said, now in a soft gray sweater and jeans. She was drying her hair with a towel. I really didn't expect anyone today. Asterisk, no worries, I said, awkwardly placing the headphones on the coffee table. I didn't mean to intrude. Asterisk, you didn't, she said, gently. Can I get you something? Tea, coffee. Asterisk, I hesitated. I should have said no, I should have left. That was the plan. But the way she looked at me, not desperate, not eager, just ... open, like she hadn't had company in a long time and didn't want to be the one to say goodbye first. Tea would be great, I said. She nodded and walked toward the kitchen, barefoot. I followed a few steps behind and leaned against the archway, watching as she moved around like she didn't need to think about it. Her presence was calm, like she had spent years perfecting the art of stillness. It struck me how different she looked, softer, older maybe, but beautiful in a way that made time feel irrelevant. Asterisk, I didn't know you were still in town, she said, filling the kettle. Asterisk, yeah, just for a few weeks, taking time off before grad school. Asterisk, Jason said you were always the focused one. Asterisk, I chuckled. He was just as smart, just ... less into deadlines. Asterisk, she smiled at that, placing 2 mugs on the counter. That sounds about right. Asterisk, a moment passed. Comfortable, but not casual, like something old had returned in a new shape. Asterisk, I'm glad you stopped by, she said finally, her voice quieter. This house has been a little too quiet lately. Asterisk, I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Outside, the rain kept falling, soft and steady. Asterisk, and in that kitchen, with a woman I barely knew anymore, I realized I wasn't in a hurry to leave. The rain kept murmuring against the windows, filling the quiet with something just loud enough to make the silence feel intentional. I sat on the far end of the couch, the same worn cushion I used to claim during movie nights back in high school. Jason and I had spent countless hours here with popcorn bowls and bad horror flicks, never really noticing the house around us. Back then, she was just his mom, kind, quiet, usually in the kitchen, or headed upstairs. At Asterisk now, she was upstairs again, getting dressed, and I was alone in a room that held more than just memory. Asterisk, there was a photo of her and Jason on the mantel, probably taken a year ago. His arm was around her, and she was laughing. It didn't feel staged. It looked like someone had caught them mid-moment. That was the kind of photo you don't plan for, but you frame anyway. Next to it sat a half-finished book, spine bent backwards, a coaster stained with coffee rings, and a thin throw blanket folded too perfectly to have been used recently. Asterisk, the scent of lavender drifted in faintly, probably her lotion. or whatever she'd just stepped out of the shower with. It lingered in the air like it had always belonged here, and suddenly it felt strange that I hadn't noticed it before. Asterisk, she came down a few minutes later, now in a navy long-sleeve shirt and soft joggers, her damp hair falling over one shoulder. There was something unguarded in how she looked. No makeup, no attempt to dress up, just her. "I hope the couch isn't as lumpy as it used to be," she said, smiling as she entered the room. I grinned. "It's exactly as lumpy as I remember." Asterisk, she sat across from me, tucking one leg under herself, both hands wrapped around her tea mug. She looked comfortable in the space, but not quite content. That's what struck me, the way she seemed so at home in this house, and yet somehow distant from it. Like it held more echoes than voices now. Asterisk, we talked. The kind of casual conversation you slide into when you're not sure how long you'll be staying. She asked about school, what I was studying, how I liked living alone. I told her the usual stuff. Long nights, bad cafeteria food, too many assignments. She laughed when I admitted I still lived off boxed mac and cheese. Asterisk, she told me she missed cooking for someone. Her voice caught there, just for a second. Jason had left last month, moved out to Denver for a new job. Something with finance. I think he'd talked about it for months, but I hadn't realized how quickly he'd gone. She said the house got too big the day after. It was like someone had turned down the volume on everything. Asterisk, I never thought I'd miss the mess, she said, staring down into her tea. But I do. Even the laundry baskets overflowing. It was ... noise, you know? Asterisk, I nodded, but I didn't say much. I didn't need to. Her words carried enough weight without me trying to lift it. Asterisk, we sat like that for a while, not in silence, exactly, but in the kind of quiet that doesn't need to be filled. She sipped her tea slowly. I watched the steam rise and fade. The clock on the wall ticked without hurry. A dog barked somewhere in the neighborhood, and then it was just rain again. Asterisk, I glanced at the time. I had meant to be gone by now. I had errands, things to do, but none of them felt important. Not in this room. Not with her sitting across from me, eyes soft, posture relaxed. Like the loneliness had temporarily let go of her. Asterisk, you can stay. A little longer, she said, almost reading my mind. If you want. Asterisk, I didn't answer right away. I just leaned back into the couch, let the cushion hold me, and said, yeah, I don't mind. Asterisk, the lavender lingered. So did I? I didn't expect to go back, not really. The charger was just an excuse. Jason had left it in my car months ago, and I could have mailed it, dropped it off at his dad's place, or simply texted him to ask if he still needed it. But instead, I found myself walking up those same porch steps, the charger wrapped in an old rubber band, and my heart doing something ridiculous in my chest. Asterisk, before I could knock. The door opened. Asterisk, she stood there with a smile that felt like it had been waiting. I saw you through the window, she said. I was hoping you'd stop by again. Asterisk, I held up the charger, suddenly conscious. I figured Jason might need this. Asterisk, she barely looked at it. Come on, I made iced tea. Asterisk, we sat on the porch. The cushions were faded from the sun, and one creaked when she shifted. She poured the tea into two mismatched glasses, hers a tall one with a lemon slice, mine a stubby old tumbler. It tasted like mint and something floral. She told me she started experimenting with tea blends lately, said it gave her something to do with her hands. Asterisk, we talked the way people do when something unspoken hums beneath the surface. She brought up the towel casually, like it wasn't still imprinted on both our minds. Asterisk, I was mortified. She said, chuckling softly. I had just stepped out of the shower, and then there you were, poor thing. You looked like you'd seen a ghost. Asterisk, I laughed. I thought I walked into the wrong house. Asterisk, we both smiled, but hers faded slowly. Thoughtfully, you handled it well. Polite, respectful. Most guys your age wouldn't have even looked away. Asterisk, I didn't know what to say to that, so I just sipped my tea. The glass was slick with condensation. The porch smelled like warm wood and honeysuckle from the garden below. I could hear the low buzz of insects in the bushes, the distant hum of a lawnmower 2 houses down. Asterisk, the sun was sinking behind the rooftops, throwing soft gold over the railing. She tucked one leg under herself, turning toward me more fully. Asterisk, you. No, she said, it's strange. I don't really have anyone to tell things to anymore. Not little things, like what I watched last night or how I accidentally overwatered the fern again. Asterisk, I looked at her then. She wasn't fishing for sympathy. She was just ... opening a window. Tell me, I said. So she did. She told me about the fern, about the documentary on sea turtles that made her cry, about how she misses her mother's Sunday phone calls more than she expected. Her voice dipped into soft places. Her eyes stayed on the horizon, but every now and then, they flicked toward me, searching for something. Asterisk, I caught her staring once, and she didn't look away fast enough. There was something in her expression, not romantic, not quite, just deeply aware of me, of the space between us, of how little we were saying out loud. Asterisk, a breeze rustled through the porch, brushing a leaf onto my shoulder. She reached over without thinking, brushed it off. But her fingers didn't just flick it away. They rested there for a beat too long, soft against my shirt, warm through the cotton. I didn't move. She didn't either. Asterisk, her hands slowly pulled back. And she looked down, folding it into her lap like it had betrayed her. Asterisk, I shouldn't, she said, quietly, more to herself than to me. Asterisk, I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I understood the weight of it. Asterisk, the sun dipped lower. The sky turned dusky blue. Neither of us moved to end the evening. We just sat there. Two people who shouldn't have been anything more than strangers connected by someone else, but weren't quite strangers anymore. Asterisk, when I finally stood to leave. She didn't ask when I'd come by again. She just said, drive safe, her voice gentler than before. Asterisk, I walked down the steps, slower than usual. The charger still sat on the porch table, forgotten. Asterisk, and the towel. It hadn't just been a moment. It had become a memory. A hinge. Asterisk, and even though no promises had been made, and no lines officially crossed, I knew I'd come back. She called about the faucet, said it was dripping and driving her crazy at night. I could have told her to call someone else, a plumber, a neighbor, anyone really, but the truth is, I wanted a reason to see her again that didn't feel like a coincidence. Asterisk, when I arrived, she was already waiting with the cabinet doors open beneath the sink, a bucket placed with a folded towel underneath. She was wearing an old shirt tied at the waist and jeans with a small tear at the knee. Her hair was in a loose braid. She looked younger than usual, or maybe just more herself. Asterisk, I was hoping you'd say yes, she said, handing me a wrench. Asterisk, we moved around each other in that small kitchen like we had done it before. She passed me tools before I even asked for them. I slid out of the way without bumping her. There was a rhythm to it, quiet and easy, like a dance that didn't need music. Asterisk, when I tightened the valve and the dripping finally stopped, she clapped once and smiled like it genuinely made her day. Asterisk, let me make us something, she said, already pulling down mugs. Coffee or wine? Asterisk, coffee's good, I said, trying not to watch the way her fingers moved along the ceramic. She hummed while the kettle heated, a melody I didn't recognize at first. Asterisk, what song is that? I asked. Asterisk, she turned to face me, eyes lighting up. Something old. From a record I found in storage last week. I used to love that stuff. Vinyl, I mean, before life got loud. Asterisk, she disappeared into the living room and returned with a thin record sleeve. Moments later, soft piano and strings poured out of the old player near the bookshelf. The music wrapped around us like something alive, something warm. Asterisk, she danced a little, barefoot on the tile. Nothing dramatic, just a sway of her hips, a subtle tilt of her head. And she laughed, free and surprised, like the laugh had snuck up on her. Asterisk, I never knew her like this. I never imagined I could. She wasn't just Jason's mom anymore. She was someone full of stories, small joys, heartbreak, and survival. Asterisk, over coffee, she talked about her ex, how the marriage had withered quietly over the years, how she'd given up too much of herself to be what everyone else needed, and how, lately, she was trying to find the parts she'd lost. Asterisk, I started painting again, she said, badly, but it makes me feel like I exist. Asterisk, I didn't interrupt, I just listened. The weight in her words didn't ask to be lightened, just heard. Asterisk, when the record skipped slightly and reset. She stood, barefoot again, and wandered down the hallway to change it. I followed. Not with intention, just instinct. Asterisk, we met halfway, down the corridor, where the light was dim and the air felt closer. Asterisk, she turned toward me, and suddenly the space between us narrowed into nothing. Her face was inches from mine. I could smell the faint trace of coffee on her breath, lavender still somewhere in her skin. My hand twitched at my side. Hers lifted slightly, not enough to reach for me, just enough to break her stillness. And then we both froze. It would have taken nothing. A lean forward, a closing of the eyes. A surrender, but neither of us moved. Asterisk, the music played on behind us. Unaware, asterisk, she stepped back first, a barely there breath escaping her lips. We shouldn't, she whispered. Asterisk, I nodded, not because I agreed, but because it was the only thing that didn't feel like betrayal. Asterisk, we returned to the living room, each sitting on separate ends of the couch. The distance between us felt more than physical, like we'd crossed an invisible threshold and then walked back from it, barefoot and careful. Asterisk, her hand rested on the cushion, a few inches from mine, close enough to feel the warmth. Asterisk, she didn't move it, neither did I. We just sat there as the record spun, as the shadows from the setting sun stretched across the floor, as the unsaid settled between us like a sleeping animal, quiet, alive, waiting. The weeks passed in a kind of hush, like we were living in parentheses. I came by with vague reasons, a dropped keychain, a plant that needed watering while she was out, something I thought she might want to borrow. She stopped pretending to be surprised. Our rhythm settled into something gentle and unspoken. Afternoon tea on the porch, small talk that always veered toward something personal, and silences that stretched without feeling empty. Asterisk, she had started wearing her hair down more. I had started staying later, pretending not to notice the way dusk clung to the walls, how her house always seemed a little warmer than the outside world. There were no rules, but something in both of us honored the invisible line we hadn't quite crossed. Asterisk, then Jason came back to town for the weekend. I saw him at the grocery store, next to the apples. Asterisk, Adam, he said, grinning like we were still in high school. Didn't expect to see you here. Asterisk, we talked casually, catching up. He asked about grad school, made a joke about his terrible cooking. Then, almost as an afterthought, he said, thanks for checking in on Mom. By the way, she told me you've been by. Said she hasn't felt this seen in a long time. Said she's lonely, but proud. Asterisk, he meant it kindly. He said it with a smile. But something shifted in my chest, like I'd been walking a narrow bridge and only now realized there was no safety net below. Asterisk, that night, I sat with the headphones in my hand, again, the same pair, untouched, still wrapped in the cord. She'd never taken them back that first day. They'd been sitting in the back seat of my car, like a secret I didn't know how to give back. Asterisk, I drove over just before sundown. The sky was a dull amber, the kind of color that makes everything look older, slower. I walked up the steps with the headphones in my hand again, but this time, I wasn't hiding behind them. Asterisk, before I could raise my hand to knock, the door opened. Asterisk, she stood there in a soft maroon sweater, jeans, no towel, no steam, just her eyes, steady, like she already knew. Asterisk, I held up the headphones. Thought I'd try returning these again. Asterisk, she looked at them, then at me, and her lips curved into something small and sad in knowing. Asterisk, you didn't come for those. She said. Asterisk, no, I admitted, I didn't. Asterisk, a pause. Long enough to breathe in. Long enough to break if either of us wanted to. She stepped aside. Come in, she said, and I did. The house looked the same, but it felt different. Lighter somehow. Or maybe I was just finally ready to see it. She walked ahead of me, her bare feet quiet on the floor, her arms crossed gently as if holding something close. She led me into the living room, where the record player still sat with the same stack of albums beside it. We didn't play any music. We sat on the couch, not far, not close, just ... together. She looked at her hands, and I looked at mine. The headphones sat between us like a symbol from another life. The version of this story where I left them on the porch and never looked back. Asterisk, I've been thinking, she said after a while, her voice low, that maybe we're not wrong. Maybe we're just not simple. Asterisk, I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Her hand found mine, no hesitation this time, just skin against skin, warm and familiar. I turned my palm upward, and she fit into it like something long overdue. Asterisk, the silence stayed, but it wasn't the awkward kind. It was the kind that follows a truth finally spoken, even if the words hadn't come out loud. Asterisk, she leaned her head against my shoulder, and I closed my eyes. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, and the headphones, forgotten again, slipped from my lap to the floor with a soft, final thud. Asterisk, they were never the point.